Hi everyone, Natu is here again, back with another video. And in this video, I'm going to explain why you shouldn't waste more of your time doing one-off deals instead of setting up a fund. Yeah, so there's a very specific type of person that should stop doing one-off deals and doing a fund. And typically when you're ready to do a fund, these are really the few snags these are the few things that you start to notice when you're ready to evolve to the fund model, because there are a lot of people that aren't qualified and aren't ready to set up an investment fund and to do the proper private placement memorandum, to do the proper structure, and to set everything up in that manner. But then there are other people that are ready, and in this video you're going to know if you're what camp you fall into, because the first sign of if you're ready to set up an investment fund is when you get tired and when you get stuck, like when you notice that the half-life of your transactions is very short. So when I say half-life, what do I really mean? So I mean, we spoke to several people, including one that is a lot of people, people that are doing fix and flips, people that are doing one-off syndications by the thousands or by the hundreds or even by the dozens. And sometimes people wonder, they look at all of the stress that goes into setting up one transaction, and they say, and then they have to deal with people that they don't control. They have to deal with lenders they don't control. They have to deal with, reselling the equity investors into a new rinse and repeat deal. They have to deal with the origination of everything. So the work is done, the work is not as bad as setting up a fund initially, but there is still work which adds up and accrues over longer periods of time. Whereas the fund is more of something that takes a god-forsaken amount of work to begin, but then you reap the long-term benefits later on. But that's more of the second point. So yeah, basically you start to notice that the benefits of the one-off deals is very, basically after the deal is one and done, then you can't reap the rewards of it because the transaction is already complete. Whereas if you were to have a pool of capital, you'll be able to have more control and say into where the capital goes, and you can just refresh over longer periods of time, meaning that there's less back and forth, and you don't have to start begging people to do this and for lenders and so on. So the half-life is really long for funds, and when you start to notice that the half-life of your deals is too short for you to, and it's a bottleneck is just a limitation. It's a concept in physics where there's a limitation to how much throughputs is going through the system. So it's like a pipe. Imagine water going through a pipe, but then the pipe just gets tight at some part of it. That's when you start to notice the bottleneck of you not being able to get more transactions done for you to hit the standards that you set for yourself. Then a fund may be something for you to do, because the half-life, the half-life just means how long does it take for it to decay. So half-life is like the time it takes to decay by half. And so when you do a one-off transaction, like let's say an M&A transaction to acquire, let's say to acquire a gas station, a car wash, whatever, you just set up you do that one transaction, you find one equity investor or one lender, with a promissory note or something that's not like a proper private placement. Then you may benefit from getting it done quickly, but you would have to now find new lenders and find new terms and find new special situations for each of these deals as you go, which can take up a lot of time, especially if you're dealing with, in America, the SBA loans, and you have to re-qualify for the same loans that you got. You have to resell new investors to come in. You have to, make sure that the debt coverage ratios make sense again. So you have to redo a lot of stuff. Whereas if you were to have your own pool of capital, you would just be able to deploy it into the mandate because the capital will already be there. Right? So that's the first thing. When you start to notice that there's a quick half-life to your deals and it's not to the standard that you'd like it to be. So number two is understanding the payoff versus the work. And if you're in a position to build something for the long term, because setting up a Setting up a pool of capital is much harder, and it's much more difficult in the short term, but in the long term, the benefits outweigh the shortcomings. So some people because it's more hard to, so it's usually best if you've done a few one-off deals, whether it be mergers and acquisitions, syndications, or whatever, maybe like, let's say, less than 10. Because if you've done that, then you can actually prove that you have a track record, so that people won't look at you like you're somebody who's doing something that you have no business doing. So if you have if you've done like at least one deal on a one-off basis, then you set up a real estate investment fund or a mergers and acquisitions fund or whatever fund for whatever mandate, but Raises.com just focuses on those two mandates. Then the work that it would take for you to sell the investors on your fund would make sense, and it would be something that people can get on board with, right? But then if you're working on but then if you don't think long term, and if you're somebody that just wants to be on the hamster wheel, and okay, yeah, like the short term deal is quicker to get done, but then in the long run you're missing out because you're not able to actually hit the milestones that you want to hit, and you still have those same bottlenecks that we spoke about earlier. So basically it's like if you understand, it's so a fund is more self-reinforcing, and it's more of an exponential curve, whereas the one-off deal is more of a seesaw curve. So so imagine the one-off deal, it takes a lot of effort, it takes a little bit of effort, boom, done. Then you have to do it again, it takes a little bit of effort, boom, done. Then you do it again, it takes a little bit of effort, boom, done. Whereas a fund is like it takes a lot of effort, then it's like woo, it gets bigger and bigger exponentially. So that's more of the that's the visual I'm trying to draw for you here, just using my fingers. I don't have a whiteboard. So the point is, the fund takes a lot of work up front for you to get the investors in, but then once the investors are in, then you're free to deploy it. So it takes a lot of discipline and work initially. Whereas the one-off transactions, they're very enticing, especially when you begin, and they're really good, but you don't want to stay stuck in them for too long, because then you can waste your time doing things that you could have been doing the hard thing earlier on, and because now that time's fine, you're getting older, you're not able to reap the benefits of something, of the compound efforts that you could have spent building this thing if you built this thing 5 years ago. So you want to just be careful of your time, and or else you're going to have kids that run circles around you. So that's number 2. Number 3 is basically control. So if you're tired of having to bend to the underwriting criteria of other people, then you want to set up a fund. Because many people, for example, if you need debts for some of the transactions, you would have to go to, in the States, get the SBA loan, wait like 2 years or 1 year, and then sometimes it gets really complicated. Then for each deal you have to refinance somebody out by getting an equity investor to come in if you were to acquire like a one-off like mergers and acquisitions deal, or if you're setting up a real estate fund, and then you want to go into a position where it's like, hey, I want to find investors for my real estate fund, and like the seller asks for proof of funds for it, and you have to go and chase somebody, and you have to go back and forth and whatever. It's really annoying. And then when you sell all these people into one deal, then it's just like it's just one transaction. So then you have to do this again and again. But why not just have a mandate to get similar transactions if you already have the track record to prove that you can do it? So that's why the fund would make sense if you're just tired of having to bend to the underwriting criteria of somebody else for one-off transactions, and then you actually control the capital, because investors would give you the money for you to deploy it directly into projects. So if you're tired of if you feel like you're more experienced than some of the lenders, and you're tired of not being your own lender or your own investor, then that's when the fund is for you. It's when you're tired and you're hitting glass ceilings. So with all these things, number one, set up a fund when you notice the half-life of your deals is too short. When you notice that the benefits, like the benefit decays really quickly, and the fact that you have to keep on doing everything from scratch over and over again, becomes a pain. Number 2 is if you're willing to put in the work to understand the long-term benefits and reap the long-term benefits of you setting up the fund earlier on, and putting a lot of work initially for you to get those investors in, but then you already know that you're going to benefit in the long term. So if you have that mindset, then the fund is for you. And number 3 is when you're tired of having to bend backwards for the underwriting criteria of some of the people that help you get your one-off deals done, and if you would rather just have your own capital pool. Now, if you're somebody who's, you're a bit overwhelmed with actually setting up a fund and everything, and actually getting the investors and getting introduced to investors, autonomously to actually close and fund your deal, then just head to raises.com, where, in a matter of a few weeks, we assist people in setting up their funds and then giving them the relationships to close a deal through compliant channels. So if that's something you'd like to learn about, just head to raises.com and you'll learn more.